The crash that made no sense on a quiet stretch of Georgia highway, beneath a black summer sky. The screech of tires shattered the stillness. A single car veered off the road, metal buckled, glass splintered, and then silence. But what happened next didn't just defy logic. It left a family devastated, a college campus in mourning, and a community with more questions than answers. How does a young man survive a crash, only to vanish without a trace? The incident. June 6, 2024. It was around 2 a.m. on June 6 when the call first came in, a single vehicle accident near Interstate 20 in Newton County, Georgia. First responders rushed to the scene, expecting the usual: a drunk driver, a medical emergency, maybe someone asleep at the wheel. But when they arrived, something was off. The car, a black sedan, had slammed into a tree. The driver's side was crumpled, airbags deployed, and the engine still warm. But the driver was gone to no blood. No footprints, no trail, just a total car and an eerie emptiness. And within minutes, that wrecked vehicle was traced back to Kyle Coleman, a 19-year-old honors student from Morehouse College, Atlanta's prestigious, historically black liberal arts school. Who was Kyle Coleman? Kyle wasn't the kind of kid to just disappear. Born and raised in Metro Atlanta, Kyle was a sophomore studying business at Morehouse, a sharp thinker, beloved by professors, deeply involved in student life. Friends called him disciplined, reserved, and grounded. He wasn't known to party hard. No enemies, no drama, just a future full of promise. When his car was found abandoned after a crash, and Kyle was nowhere to be seen, panic spread quickly. Why would someone like him flee the scene of an accident? Was he injured and lost in the woods? Was he running from something or someone? Or was something more sinister at play? The search begins that morning. Kyle's parents received the worst kind of call. Their son's car had been found, wrecked and empty. And Kyle? Unreachable. Phone off. No social media activity. No witnesses. A missing person report was filed. Police and volunteers scoured the surrounding woods. Drones were deployed. Search dogs combed through the thick Georgia brush. Temperatures soared to the high 80s. The terrain was unforgiving, tangled with undergrowth, sharp inclines, and wetlands. And yet, nothing. Kyle had simply vanished. Each hour that passed without answers felt heavier than the last. His family was left in limbo, clutching hope, fighting back dread. And then came day 4 at the pond on June 10th, for agonizing days after the crash. Investigators noticed something strange: a small retention pond less than half a mile from the crash site. In earlier searches, it had been overlooked due to heavy brush and unclear property access. That morning, a dive team called by noon. The worst fears were confirmed. The body of Kyle Coleman was pulled from the murky water, fully clothed. No obvious injuries. No signs of struggle. No suicide note. Just gone. How did Kyle end up in that pond? Was he trying to get help and got lost? Did he drown accidentally, disoriented, panicked, and hurt after the crash? Or did someone lead him there? What happened between the moment his car crashed and the moment he died? Authorities were quick to call it a non-suspicious death. But the public wasn't so sure. Too many things didn't add up. Why was there no sign of struggle, yet no explanation for why he ran? Why didn't the search teams find him sooner, in a pond less than 1,000 feet from the crash? And perhaps the most haunting question of all, what did Kyle see or know in those final moments? A vanishing act in the dark. When 19-year-old Kyle Coleman's body was pulled from a pond just days after his car crash, many expected closure. But what followed was anything but. His death raised more questions than answers. Why was he found in a body of water barely 1,000 feet from the crash site? Why didn't trained dogs or aerial drones detect him sooner? And what happened in the 4 days between the crash and the discovery? Timeline of a disappearance. Let's rewind. June 6th, around 2 a.m. Kyle's car, a black Hyundai, leaves the roadway off I-20 in Newton County, Georgia. It crashes into a tree just off the exit ramp. The car is totaled. No passengers. No other vehicles involved. And no signs of Kyle. By 2:30 a.m., the wreck is reported to police. They arrive. The vehicle is still warm, but Kyle is gone. Just gone. Within hours, a missing person case is opened. Authorities begin combing the area. Search dogs, drones, volunteers, ATVs. The works. the pond where Kyle would eventually be found, not checked. Why? Because it was private property, and because the water was murky with low visibility. Authorities said it didn't seem likely someone would go in there. They were wrong. What Kyle left behind Kyle's phone was never recovered. But investigators did pull basic phone records from the tower logs. No calls, no texts, no pings after 1:58 a.m. Just minutes before the crash. No social media updates, no outgoing messages. A digital dead zone. It was as if Kyle simply stepped off the grid. In the age where most 19-year-olds never go more than a few minutes without touching their phones, his wallet, keys, and student ID were found inside the crashed car. Nothing was stolen. No signs of forced entry or foul play. That's what made this case so chilling. Everything was intact, except for Kyle. The body cam clip. On June 7th, the day after Kyle went missing, deputies returned to the area, retracing steps to INA now public. Body cam recording. One officer walks a few hundred yards from the crash site, scanning the wooded area. He stops, looks down toward the tree line, and mutters, "Man, if he went down there. It's thick. Could be anywhere." He was pointing toward the pond. They didn't search it then. They moved on. That brief moment, that single glance in the right direction, would haunt Kyle's family for days. What if they had just looked a little closer? Discovery in the water. On June 10th, after another full day of fruitless searching, the pond was finally added to the search perimeter. Divers entered the water just before noon. Visibility was low. The pond was filled with algae and sediment. Within minutes, they found him. Kyle was discovered fully clothed, face down, submerged near the center of the pond. There were no visible wounds, no torn clothes, no defensive injuries. Autopsy reports were inconclusive. No drugs, no alcohol, no blunt force trauma. Drowning was listed as the probable cause of death, but it didn't answer the most disturbing question: how and why did he get into the water at all? Theories begin to spiral. As soon as the news of Kyle's death broke, online speculation exploded. Some said it was a classic case of post-crash disorientation, that Kyle, possibly concussed or in shock, wandered into the woods and drowned accidentally. Others weren't buying it. They pointed to the delayed pond search, the clean condition of his body, the lack of any signs of a struggle. Some even suggested Kyle might have been running from something, or someone. One Reddit thread exploded with speculation. What if he was being chased? Another post asked, why would a smart, disciplined student just walk into a pond in the middle of the night, fully clothed, without calling for help? The official word from the Newton County Sheriff's Office: no foul play suspected. But that statement did little to quiet the storm. Kyle's mother, devastated and unsatisfied, took to social media. Her post read, "My son is gone. We don't believe the story they're telling. We want the truth." But what is the truth? Why did trained search crews miss Kyle just yards away from the crash? Why did the pond, so close, become the final resting place for a young man with everything ahead of him? And what secrets were hidden in the hours before that fatal crash? The final hours. What Kyle didn't tell anyone in every disappearance. The final hours are key. Where was the victim? Who did they talk to? And in Kyle Coleman's case, what happened in the time between his last known contact and the crash that would become his last trace of life? This part of Kyle's story is the most frustrating, because despite a clear timeline, too much of it still doesn't make sense. 6 hours before the crash, the last seen June 5, 2024. It was a Wednesday. Kyle was home from Morehouse for the summer, staying with relatives in Newton County. That evening, he borrowed the family car, a black Hyundai Elantra, telling his aunt he was headed to meet up with friends. He left the house around 7:30 p.m. That was the last time his family saw him alive. What followed was a digital trail, full of silences, odd gaps, and one unexplained location ping that no one has been able to interpret. The unanswered text Kyle's phone records show he sent a brief text around 8:03 p.m. to a friend from school. "Yo, you still good for later?" The friend never replied. There were no more outgoing messages after that. No GPS check-ins, no social media activity, no bank card swipes, no Apple Pay. Then, nothing, until just after 1:50 a.m., when Kyle's phone briefly connected to a tower, less than 2 miles from the crash site. One last digital footprint. Then his phone either died, was turned off, or submerged. The mystery location, that final tower ping, placed Kyle near a closed industrial park outside Covington, a location surrounded by thick trees, chain-link fences, and abandoned warehouses to no restaurants. No stores. No homes. So what was he doing there? Police later said there was no indication of criminal activity at the location. But what if Kyle had arranged to meet someone there? What if something went wrong? The crash itself at 2:07 a.m. Kyle's car veered off an exit ramp on I-20 and slammed into a tree. Investigators said the vehicle was traveling at speed, not braking, not swerving. It wasn't a fender bender. It was a full-force collision, the airbag deployed. But Kyle wasn't in the car when help arrived minutes later. So, did he crawl out, injured and confused? Was he running from someone? Or was he forced to leave the vehicle? One chilling detail often overlooked: the crash site was surrounded by no streetlights, just thick woods, dense underbrush, and total darkness. That if Kyle was injured, terrified, or disoriented, it would have felt like walking into a black hole. Who was he meeting? Kyle's friends from Morehouse were interviewed in the days following the crash. All said the same thing: Kyle was low-key. He didn't hang with sketchy people. But one friend, who asked not to be named, said Kyle had been acting strange the week prior. He was quiet, distracted. He didn't say much about it. But he mentioned someone from home was trying to pull him into something he didn't want to do. I thought he meant family drama or something. Now I'm not so sure. Could Kyle have been pressured into a late-night meeting? Could someone have been threatening him? Or was it all coincidence? No one knows, because Kyle never said. The silence around the case. What makes this case feel even more chilling is the lack of public updates. After Kyle's body was recovered, the Newton County Sheriff's Office quickly ruled the death non-suspicious. No further comment, no follow-up press conferences, no explanation for why the pond wasn't searched sooner. But Kyle's family wasn't satisfied, and neither was the public. His mother began a social media campaign under the hashtag Justice for Kyle Coleman, urging anyone with information about his final hours to come forward, no matter how small. So far, nothing. Kyle's final hours remained shrouded in silence. No one saw him crash. No one saw him leave. No one can explain how a bright, grounded young man ended up alone, underwater, and forgotten just yards from where he crashed. But there's one more layer to this mystery. Accident or setup? What the evidence suggests 19-year-old Kyle Coleman disappeared after crashing his car in the middle of the night. For days later, he was found drowned in a pond less than 1,000 feet from the scene. No visible injuries. No witnesses. No clear motive. And no foul play, according to police. But what if that conclusion was too quick? What if something darker, something planned, was hidden in plain sight? A suspiciously quiet investigation from the beginning. Local authorities treated Kyle's death as an accident. No criminal charges. No person of interest. No signs of trauma. No signs of drugs or alcohol in the autopsy. But to those watching closely, especially Kyle's friends and family, the investigation felt too quiet. No timeline released. No toxicology results shared with the public. And no surveillance footage, despite Kyle traveling through areas that likely had cameras. One former Morehouse classmate posted to Facebook. Y'all keep saying no foul play. But how do you just crash, disappear, and drown half a mile away with no explanation? The setup theory emerges as online conversations heated up. A disturbing possibility began to surface. Was Kyle lured? Let's revisit what we know. Kyle left the house the night of June 5th, telling relatives he was meeting friends. He texted one person briefly and got no reply. He wound up near an abandoned industrial site in the middle of the night. He crashed his car and vanished without a trace. His body was later found in a pond not far from the crash, but he was not wet when he left the car. His phone was never recovered. Now ask yourself this: why would Kyle, an intelligent, cautious, honors student, walk into a dark, wooded area near an unlit pond in the early hours of the morning without calling for help? Unless he wasn't alone. Unless someone led him there. The missing phone and the vanishing data. Perhaps the most frustrating piece of this mystery is the missing phone. Authorities confirmed that Kyle's iPhone was not found with the body or in the vehicle. Search teams scoured the crash area with metal detectors. Still nothing. Phone location data ends abruptly at 1:58 a.m. Experts say that if the phone was turned off or destroyed, it would stop pinging. But there are no records of recovery, no announcement about iCloud access, no text messages made public. Kyle's last digital connection to the world, wiped clean. To many, this isn't just a coincidence, it's a red flag. One online commenter, claiming to be a former digital forensic investigator, posted, "If his phone was tossed or submerged elsewhere, someone didn't want it found." A mysterious post-crash footprint, though never officially confirmed. Several local residents told news outlets they had seen movement near the tree line the morning after the crash. One woman, who lived less than a quarter mile from the scene, told WXIA, "I thought I saw a flashlight flickering in the woods around sunrise. I just assumed it was searchers." But according to official records, no search teams were dispatched until hours later. Who was in the woods? Was it Kyle, alive and looking for help? Or was someone else out there, cleaning up loose ends? That same wooded area leads directly to the pond where Kyle was found. It's possible he wandered. It's possible he collapsed from injury or dehydration. But it's also possible someone didn't want him found. Police response under scrutiny. Kyle's family wasn't just upset by his death. They were furious with how slowly and selectively the investigation unfolded. Why didn't they search the pond earlier? Why wasn't his phone aggressively tracked? Why, in a crash involving a healthy college student with no reason to run, did law enforcement assume he'd just wandered off? Public pressure eventually forced the Newton County Sheriff's Office to respond. Their statement read, "There is no evidence of foul play. Based on all available data, this remains a tragic accident. Out of respect for the family, we have no further comment." But silence isn't enough when something feels wrong. Kyle's death has now joined a growing list of unexplained disappearances that leave behind more shadows than answers. Accident? Misadventure? Or setup? His mother put it best in a post that's since gone viral. "You don't know how much you don't know until it's your child. He didn't deserve to die like this. And we will not rest until we know everything." The landscape of death, how the woods kept his secret. When someone goes missing in the woods, the terrain can become both an accomplice and a grave. For Kyle Coleman, the forest swallowed him whole, even as drones, dogs, and daylight combed the area. For days, hundreds of searchers, and yet his body was just a few hundred feet away. Today, we examine how geography, timing, and human error combined to hide the truth, and what that tells us about Kyle's final moments. The crash location, a blind spot. To understand how Kyle disappeared, we need to look at exactly where it happened. The exit ramp off I-20 where Kyle crashed is surrounded by dense pine and oak forest, with thick undergrowth that swells in summer, and no sidewalks. No cameras, and most importantly, no lights. When Kyle's car veered off the ramp and struck a tree, he crashed into one of the few pockets of Newton County where GPS signals often drop and cell service is unreliable. Rescue teams arrived quickly but found no trace of Kyle, not even footprints. And without a clear trail to follow, they focused on the road and surrounding brush. But what they didn't do, at least not right away, was search the pond nearby. It was behind a natural berm, obscured by tree trunks and tall grass that, in other words, you couldn't see it. Even if you were standing 50 yards away. Why the dogs missed him? Search and rescue dogs are trained to follow scent trails. But they're not infallible. In Kyle's case, the dogs were deployed hours after the crash, and the weather worked against them. That morning, it rained lightly. The soil was moist, and humidity hung in the air. Experts say that rain can dilute or scatter scent molecules, especially if the person is submerged. And here's the chilling part. If Kyle had entered the pond shortly after the crash, either willingly or not, the dogs never stood a chance. The pond, nature's disguise. The pond where Kyle was found wasn't large. It spanned about 70 yards across, surrounded by overgrowth and located on private land. It had no dock, no open path to the water, and no recreational use. It was just there, hidden in the trees. Authorities have since admitted the pond was not initially prioritized in their search strategy. Why? Because they assumed Kyle had wandered off into the woods, not into the water. But that assumption cost precious time. Kyle's body was discovered face down, fully clothed, not decomposed beyond recognition, and with no apparent struggle wounds. Medical examiners placed his time of death closely following the crash, which means he was in that water the whole time, just waiting to be found. The missed opportunity on day 2. On the second day of the search, a drone team flew over the wooded area, but visibility over the pond was poor. Tall tree canopies cast shadows over the water's surface, and thick algae created a mirror-like effect that made it difficult to detect anything beneath. One searcher later told local reporters, "We flew directly over that pond. Had no clue what was under it. Looked like mud from the air. The water, murky and still, hid everything. Even Kyle." Locals speak out after Kyle's body was recovered. Nearby residents started asking why it took so long. One retired firefighter who lives less than a mile from the scene told WSB-TV, "That's the first place I'd have looked. People don't run into thick woods unless they're trying to hide. But water? That's natural in a panic." Another neighbor added, "We've seen wrecks on that exit before. They always go down into that ravine. But no one ever checked that far out." In hindsight, the signs were clear, but in real time, the woods worked like camouflage. 4 days, dozens of searchers, a grieving family begging for answers, and all along, Kyle Coleman was just steps from where he crashed, hidden by trees, shadow, and a system that failed to look closely enough. But this story isn't just about a tragic oversight. It's about a life full of promise and the unanswered question that still lingers. Did Kyle go into that water by choice? Did Kyle give up, or was he silenced? The crash, the disappearance, the body, found days later in still water, without wounds, without answers. For 19-year-old Kyle Coleman, death came suddenly, quietly, and inexplicably. But what if his final moments didn't begin with panic, but pressure? What if Kyle wasn't running from a crash, but something far more dangerous? Kyle's mental state. What we know in the days after Kyle's death, online theories flooded social media. Some believed it was an accident. Others whispered darker ideas: suicide, revenge, setup, even gang activity. But the truth lies somewhere in the shadows between them. According to his family, Kyle had no history of depression, that he was not taking any psychiatric medications, had no previous run-ins with the law, and was focused on his future, a rising sophomore at Morehouse College, majoring in political science. His mother, Charisse, was clear. Kyle was grounded, smart, motivated. He had plans, grad school, internships. He didn't vanish because he gave up. Someone, or something, made him disappear. And yet, the final 24 hours of his life paint a different, more complicated picture. The unsent message: Kyle's phone was never recovered, but through cloud backups and partial data from the carrier, his family was able to piece together fragments of his final activity. One chilling discovery stood out. At 1:52 a.m., just 15 minutes before the crash, Kyle began drafting a message in his notes. app.it read, "I messed up. I didn't mean for this to happen. I tried to walk away, but now it's too late. If anything happens to me." The message cuts off mid-sentence. There's no timestamp of when it was last edited, no recipient, and no evidence it was shared. What happened after that? No one knows. But whatever it was, it interrupted him permanently. The rumors no one wanted to believe. In the weeks after Kyle's death, friends and classmates began whispering about a situation back home, something Kyle had apparently been dealing with quietly. One friend confided he was getting texts from someone, an older guy, not a student. He wouldn't say much, just that it was someone who didn't take no for an answer. He called it a problem he had to handle on his own. Was Kyle being harassed? Was he being blackmailed? Or was he trying to distance himself from someone dangerous? Investigators never confirmed whether Kyle had filed any police reports, but there is no record of restraining orders or protective actions. Whatever this situation was, Kyle kept it to himself until it followed him into the night. A pattern in the silence. If Kyle was in danger, it wouldn't be the first time a young black man went missing under suspicious circumstances, only to have his death labeled an accident without deeper investigation. Too often, these deaths are minimized, their context erased by sterile words like "no foul play suspected." But Kyle's story resists closure. Why didn't he seek help after the crash? Why was his phone missing? Why were his last words written, not spoken? And why has no one, in a world of always connected devices, come forward with a single photo, message, or lead? The deeper you dig, the more obvious it becomes. Something, or someone, is still missing from the story. A legacy interrupted. On June 15th, 2024, 1 week after Kyle's body was found, hundreds gathered at Morehouse College for a candlelight vigil. Friends remembered his big smile, his quick mind, his love of history, sneakers, and debate club, his dreams of becoming a civil rights attorney. His mother spoke through tears. "My son didn't drown in a pond, he drowned in a world that didn't care enough to look for him in time. And if we don't demand answers, it will happen again." The family has since hired a private investigator. They've filed public records requests, and they've vowed to keep Kyle's name alive, not just as a memory, but as a question that we may never know exactly what happened on the night of June 6th. But this much is clear. Kyle Coleman didn't just vanish, he was lost in plain sight. First by whoever he may have trusted, and then by the system meant to protect him. Whether he was chased, silenced, or simply failed, the truth deserves to surface, just like Kyle did.
What did you think of the case? Please share your thoughts in the comment below. If you want more video like this, please be sure to like the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on more true crime videos. See you in the next one.